I rise today in strong opposition to the so-called Honest Act. Whether in its incarnation last Congress as the Secret Science Act or in this year's incarnation as the Honest Act, let us be clear. This Orwellian-named bill is clearly designed to suppress certain scientific research that has been the foundation for essential health and environmental regulations. In addition to hindering scientific advancement, this bill risks violating people's privacy by exposing sensitive patient data, and it's harmful to public health. The clear aim of the Honest Act is to undermine EPA's efforts to take action in a variety of areas, such as climate and air pollution. And let me also be clear, in my state of Connecticut, we rely on those regulations to deal with the asthma crisis we have based on power plants in other parts of the country blowing polluted air into my state. The so-called Honest Act accomplishes this objective by excluding legitimate, peer-reviewed research from the policy process. If this bill were to become law, EPA would have no choice but to lean increasingly on industry-funded studies instead. At my recent town hall meeting in Waterbury, Connecticut, one American after another stood up and expressed their fear and outrage at the attempts made in this House and by the new administration to take science out of public policy. My constituents want genuine scientific research guiding our efforts to protect our environment and safeguard public health. They don't want agenda-driven studies funded by fossil fuel companies determining the EPA's actions on climate policy. And while the majority attempted to alleviate some of our privacy concerns with this bill, the reality is that any person whom EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt deems worthy will have access to sensitive patient information. Why is this a problem? Because fewer people will be willing to participate in the studies that are necessary to understand air and water quality issues. Who can blame them? No one wants their medical records shared with strangers or, worse, made public. The result is that the EPA will have to rely on incomplete science to issue life-saving regulations. Sadly, Mr. Speaker, this bill is another example of the political crusade against science that we're seeing coming from both Congress and the new administration. We should be confronting the economic and environmental realities of our changing climate. But just yesterday, President Trump issued an executive order that would have us pretend that climate change does not exist. Only weeks earlier, the EPA administrator himself said that without evidence that he disagreed with the scientific consensus that human activity is the primary contributor to global climate change. In my home state of Connecticut, we are downwind from these power plants that are burning dirty coal. We see elevated rates of asthma, higher rates of cardiopulmonary issues. And if this bill is passed, many longitudinal scientific studies, like the ones that establish the link between air pollution and asthma, would be excluded from playing a role in the EPA's actions. Mr. Speaker, let's allow the EPA to do its job. I urge my colleagues to oppose this misguided bill. And before I yield back my time, I have two letters in opposition to place in the record from the Union of Concerned Scientists and from the Environmental Defense Fund.